What if everything you've been told about addiction is only half the story? What if it's not just about bad choices, broken brains, or chasing dopamine hits? What if the real fight is deeper, darker, something ancient that has been gripping souls since the dawn of time? This isn't just a habit you can't kick. This is spiritual warfare, and the Bible has been screaming the truth about it for centuries. Stick with me, because this could be the moment you see addiction for what it really is and find the key to breaking free. Addiction. It's a word we throw around like it explains everything. Drugs, alcohol, porn, gambling, your phone, name it and someone's hooked. Society tells you it's a brain glitch, a chemical imbalance, a trauma response. They point to science, dopamine spikes, rewired neurons, withdrawal shakes, and sure, that's part of it. Your body feels like it's betraying you, like you're trapped in a cycle you can't escape. But here's the question that keeps you up at night. Why, even when you know it's killing you, do you keep going back? Why does it feel like something else is in the room whispering, just one more time you'll feel better? That's not just your brain, that's something spiritual. And the Bible? It doesn't call it addiction, it calls it bondage. The invisible chains. Let's get real for a second. You've felt it, haven't you? That pull, that weight. Like something's got its claws in you, dragging you back to the thing you swore you'd quit. It's not just a craving, it's like a presence. The Bible doesn't mess around with fancy terms. Romans 6:16 cuts straight to the core. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey? That's not a metaphor, it's a gut punch. Every time you give in, you're not just slipping, you're renewing a dark covenant, handing over your will to something that never cared about you. Think about Samson, a man chosen by God, gifted with supernatural strength, meant to save a nation. But he couldn't walk away from Delilah. She wasn't just a woman, she was a pattern, a trap he kept running back to, even when he knew she'd betray him. He lied to her, escaped her traps, and still went back. That's not love, that's not even lust, that's bondage dressed up as desire. Samson didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because something owned him, and it cost him everything. His strength, his sight, his purpose. Sound familiar? The lie you believe, here's where it gets heavy. Addiction isn't just about what you do, it's about what you believe about yourself. The enemy doesn't just tempt you to act, he tempts you to define yourself by your struggle. That voice in your head saying, "This is just who you are," or "You'll never change." That's not you, that's a lie planted to keep you chained. The Bible exposes this in John 8:34, where Jesus says, "Everyone who sins is a slave to sin," not a struggler, a slave. But here's the hope. Slaves can be set free. Take Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. He had it all, wealth, power, God's favor. But his heart was split. 1 Kings 11 tells us his wives turned him to foreign gods, pulling him away from the one who gave him everything. Addiction always starts with a divided heart, craving something you were told to leave alone. Solomon didn't just disobey, he became obsessed, chasing what he thought would fill him. And it left him empty. Why does this matter? Because you're not just fighting a habit, you're fighting for your identity. The enemy wants you to believe you are your addiction, but God says you're his child, chosen, loved, made for more. Which voice are you listening to? The spiritual war. Let's talk about what science won't touch. Addiction feels like possession because spiritually it often is. The Bible doesn't use the word addiction, but it's woven into every story of craving, slavery, and returning to what breaks you. Proverbs 23 paints a picture of a drunkard. "They hit me, but I'm not hurt, so I'll wake up so I can have another drink." That's not just a bad night, that's a cycle, a madness that numbs you to your own wounds. Replace wine with anything, pills, porn, scrolling. It's the same trap, wearing a new mask. But it gets wilder. Ancient texts like the Book of Jubilees pull back the curtain. After the flood, when God cleansed the earth, a demon named Mastema begged to keep a fraction of his evil spirits above ground. And God, brace yourself, said yes. Jubilees 10:9 reveals that 1/10 of those spirits were allowed to stay, to tempt, to torment, to latch onto human weakness. They don't come for the strong, they come for the broken places in you, the grief, the shame, the wounds you've buried. That's where they whisper, You need this to feel okay. The enemy's strategy. Ever wonder why it's so hard to break free? Why you can go to rehab, pray, cry, and still relapse? It is because you are not just fighting your flesh, you are fighting an enemy with a strategy. The Testament of Reuben warns that spirits of fornication, drunkenness, and greed wage war in your mind. They study you. They know your triggers, your secrets, your soft spots. And they don't just tempt you, they move in. Look at Saul, Israel's first king. His addiction wasn't drugs or lust, it was control. He couldn't let go of power, even when God chose someone else. He spiraled from insecurity to paranoia, from leading battles to chasing David like a madman. He even turned to a witch, breaking his own laws, just to cling to what he'd lost. That's addiction, chasing what destroys you even when you know it's over. And then there's Judas. He didn't just betray Jesus for money, he was addicted to a version of the Messiah that didn't exist, a warrior king who'd crush Rome. When Jesus didn't fit that mold, Judas forced the story, thinking betrayal would spark a revolution. But when it backfired, the crash was fatal. Addiction always takes you further than you planned, leaving you emptier than you started. The ancient trap. This isn't new. Addiction is as old as Eden. The fruit wasn't just about rebellion, it was desire. Craving something that promised life but delivered death. The Israelites in the wilderness, freed from slavery, fed by miracles, yet begging to go back to Egypt. Why? Because addiction makes you romanticize the chains that once held you. They didn't miss Egypt's whips. They missed the numbness, the familiarity, the ease of not having to fight for freedom. The sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, took it further. As priests, they had access to God's presence, but they turned it into a buffet for their cravings. They stole offerings, slept with women at the temple, used the sacred to feed their lust. They weren't atheists, they were addicts, believing they could outrun the consequences. They didn't. Here's the truth. Addiction isn't a modern disease. It's a spiritual trap, ancient and intelligent. The Book of Enoch calls it out, describing demons as spirits of fallen angels, cursed to roam the earth, addicted to chaos and human suffering. They don't have bodies, so they use yours. They don't feel, so they make you feel for them. And every time you give in, they feed, breaking the covenant. So how do you fight something this big? You don't start with willpower, you start with war. 2 Timothy 2:26 says, "The devil takes people captive to do his will, but you can escape his trap. Not by trying harder, but by facing the truth. You've been taken." Addiction thrives on lies. You're in control. This is just who you are. God's done with you. Those aren't your thoughts. They're scripted by an enemy who knows how to sound like you. The first step is to name it. Stop calling it a habit or a struggle. Call it bondage. Call it spiritual warfare, because you can't fight what you won't name. The second step is to stop fighting alone. James 5:16 says, "Confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed." Healing comes in community, not isolation. You need people who'll hold you accountable, pray over you, remind you who you are when you forget. Filling the void. Here is the part most miss. Deliverance isn't the finish line, it is the starting point. Jesus warned in Luke 11 that when an evil spirit leaves, it comes back with worse spirits if it finds the house empty. Freedom isn't just about casting something out, it's about filling the space with something stronger. You need God's Spirit to replace the spirits that fed on you. Romans 12 talks about being transformed by renewing your mind, not shaming it, not punishing it, but filling it with truth until the lies can't breathe. You've got to kill the back door, that secret, just in case you keep open for the old temptation. The excuse, the backup plan, the "I'll quit tomorrow." As long as it's there, the enemy has a key. True freedom comes when you say, "I'd rather die than go back." The voice that wins addiction isn't just a behavior, it's an identity war. The enemy wants you to believe you are your struggle. But God's voice says different. You are mine, you are chosen, you are not your past. Romans 8:1 declares, "There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." The enemy accuses to destroy, God convicts to restore. When you fall, the devil says, "Look what you did." God says, "Look who you are now, get up." Feed that voice. Pray when you don't feel like it. Read the word like your life depends on it, because it does. Surround yourself with people who'll speak life over you, not just pat your back while you spiral. This isn't self-help. This is spiritual rewiring. The prison wasn't the habit, it was the lie you believed about yourself. The fight isn't over. If you're still fighting, if you've prayed and relapsed, cried and gone back, hear this. You're not too far gone. You're not alone. Addiction is a battlefield, not the end of your story. The Bible doesn't promise the enemy will leave you alone. It promises you have authority over him. But you can walk in that authority while agreeing with the lie that this is just who you are. You weren't made for chains. You weren't created to numb yourself to survive. You were made to be a temple filled with God's power, truth, and spirit. So stop calling it your struggle. Call it what it is, a spiritual attack that ends now. Walk different. Think different. Speak different. The war isn't over, but you've got the weapon. If this hit you, don't walk away. Share this with someone who's still fighting. You never know who needs to hear that they were not their addiction. They were a child of God, and freedom is closer than they think.